The biggest pushbacks really are perhaps more around that kind of what I mentioned earlier on about it being a long journey to do this successfully. As I mentioned, it's not something that can be done necessarily in 6 months. It varies, and it's something that you're going to have to be doing constantly as new instruments come in, new questions come up, etc. So I think the biggest pushback really is like, we have to keep doing this for a longer time, and there's a commitment to it. And that's when you get into the kind of culture of the kind of management and ensuring that it continues.
Picture this. You walk into a state-of-the-art biotech lab. You'll see millions in equipment, some of the sharpest minds in science, and half the data is trapped in spreadsheets no one else can read. Data lives in silos, spreadsheets bridge the gaps, automation projects stall before they start. My guest today, David Hardy, market and innovation strategist at Thermo Fisher Scientific, has spent 25 years at the intersection of data, automation, and lab science. He's here to unpack why connectivity is the quiet bottleneck few are solving. Are you juggling the complexities of CMC development while trying to enjoy the beauty of biotech? Have you ever wondered if there's a way to simplify bioprocessing? Welcome to the Smart Biotech Scientist podcast, where we're diving headfirst into the very challenges you face. We're breaking it down, demystifying the jargon, and giving you the keys to unlock your full potential. I'm your host, David Brohlman, and I get it. With 15 plus years in the biotech industry, I face the same challenges you do. There's a way to simplify and streamline so you can remove complexity, you can skip trials and errors, deliver without delay your groundbreaking therapy to clinics at market, and still enjoy every single step. Do you want to learn how industry experts and I did it? Grab a cup of coffee and your favorite notebook and pen. Now is the time to take your bioprocessing game to the next level. Let's smarten up biotech. David, welcome. It's good to have you on today.
Thank you, David. Glad to be here.
To start us out, David, share something that you believe about data connectivity and data integration that most people disagree with.
That's a great opening question. Where I see the biggest challenges rather than disagreements is that when you embark on digital transformation project, it's a long game. It's not let's get this done in a couple of months, 6 months, a year, whatever. This is kind of a challenge almost for life, where new data's coming in, new ideas, new questions require kind of new pieces of data or to go back to the original data. I think that's one of the kind of biggest challenges and misconceptions around particularly the automated digital lab and data connectivity, is that it can be done ultimately very quickly. It can, in some regards, if you take a small project, it's just like any project. But really, this is a long game. It's not something that can be done quickly overnight. You have to really plan for it and stick to it.
I love this topic, and I'm excited to be able to talk about and peel the onion a bit more. But before we do that, I would love to talk about yourself. So tell us what first sparked your interest in data and digital technology, and what were some of the pivotal moments along your career path?
I think it all started over 25 years ago. I was fortunate enough doing a postdoc at Astra. I actually went through the merger with AstraZeneca. What I was doing there was NMR, nuclear magnetic resonance. And the group I was in, they had a great way of just storing the data, of archiving it. The company had a great strategy for when you create a new compound, you register it, it gets an ID. That was then used to kind of store it long term. Back in the day, it was on CDs, I believe, and then we got a kind of server, etc. And with that, it got me thinking about a chemist would come up and say, hey, can I get this kind of spectra? So what I was doing was thinking about how can we make that more easy? How can we make it more accessible for the chemist in this particular case? So bear in mind, this is 1999, I think it was. what I did is I created a web page back in using Perl in the day to allow the chemists from their computer to access that kind of data and to search that legacy data and to find it. And that really got me thinking about, okay, this is just NMR data. And luckily we had pretty good metadata around it at the time, but it got me thinking about what's the bigger context of this? What happens if we start kind of bringing in LCMS data? We were doing some kind of hyphenated techniques. So it was really just the thought then of what's possible when all this data is brought together and contextualized. And that really sparked my interest and career in data, shall we say.
And what were the steps leading you to your current function? Can you tell us what you have done since working on M&R?
Since then, obviously I was a postdoc, and then I've gone into the land of the largely analytical instruments. So I've worked for a range of other vendors, primarily focusing on things like LC, mass spec. I did take a brief sabbatical out into the land of retail analytics, which was super interesting, and they're very big data sets. You think of how many items are sold in these supermarkets daily. But I still had the draw of what I would class as kind of the proper traditional kind of scientific. So I only spent a couple of years there before being drawn back into working for Thermo Fisher Scientific, where I am now. And along the way, I've done a range of jobs from things like software developer to product manager. And actually, when I joined Thermo, I actually joined in a pre-sales role. I've never really been at the pointy end of business, but it was great to get out there to visit lots of customers, lots of diverse customers as well. So not just pharma and biopharma type of customers, but all the different labs, talking to them, seeing the labs. And they all fundamentally had the same issues around data.
And what was the moment as you were working with these customers and different people and different stakeholders? What was the moment that made you realize that most labs were operating with a fundamental connectivity problem?
I don't think there was one particular aha moment, as this is the kind of the challenge that they've got. I think it's an accumulation of going back to my Astra and AstraZeneca days through to visiting those pre-sale situation potential customers, and really not seeing a kind of great change in how they all handle their vast amounts of data. Over that time period, the amount of data that's being produced grown kind of exponentially, but fundamentally the challenges are still the same, particularly now with I won't say the advent of AI, but the adoption of AI and the need for good quality data. Everything has just really kind of come together.
Data is very complex. There's a lot of changes happening today. We have new technologies, different mindsets. From my experience, also talking to different labs, to different companies, you get different answers. What are some of the most common issues you see people push back when you come with new digital solutions or new ideas?
In terms of pushback, in principle, I don't think you get very much pushback. In terms of, look, we need to kind of digitally transform this lab. We need to make this data accessible for AI, etc. No one's going to disagree with that concept and that approach. Yes, everyone's initially for, let's do something about this. Let's transform the lab. Think of all the things we can do with the data when we've got it all together and standardized, contextualized, etc. The biggest pushbacks really are perhaps more around that kind of what I mentioned earlier on, about it being a long journey to do this successfully. As I mentioned, it's not something that can be done necessarily in 6 months. It varies, and it's something that you're going to have to be doing constantly as new instruments come in, new questions come up, etc. So the biggest pushback really is like, oh, we have to keep doing this for a longer time, and there's a commitment to it. And that's when you get into the kind of culture of the kind of management and ensuring that it continues.
And what would be the culture you need that it continues? What are some mindsets teams would need to be successful?
I think in terms of the mindset, it's having, again, I don't think anyone out there would not have a digital mindset in terms of think of what we could do, the ease of creating reports, ease of creating submissions, etc. Occasionally there's pushback in terms of, well, this is the way we've been doing things. So the cultural aspects kind of needed are very much a long-term vision of what they're going to do with the data, the type of questions they're going to handle in the future. And then that goes into the culture of the leadership. Quite often I've seen presentations, some great presentations around things like knowledge graphs in particular, contextualizing data, relating everything. But then you follow up with them a year later, and that kind of project has been shelved or postponed. It's going back to that kind of longer term vision of the data and what you can achieve with it.
Now, I'm curious, David. I've seen various labs, various people talking about data, and you mentioned in the beginning of our conversation that data sets have increased exponentially. Now, a problem that I've seen is fragmentation. It's stored in different systems. You have different legacy systems, different ways of doing things. When you walk into a biotech lab, how do you spot that digital fragmentation is creating problems and problems that these teams have not even recognized yet?
It's quite easy to spot. One thing you missed off there, and I represent a vendor, Thermo Fisher Scientific, and customers have the choice. They're free to choose a range of vendors, which again can present some kind of challenges when it comes to getting that data transformation, the data journey, getting all that kind of data together. But really, when you go into a lab, you get very early on a clear picture as to what state it's in, whether they're still using Excel, for example, to manage all that data. Hopefully, they're not writing it down, transcribing it onto paper. That still does kind of happen. But I think as you get in there and you start talking to them, understanding what they're doing today and what their vision is around digital transformation, then you get a very clear picture as to how advanced they are on that journey.
And where do you think does the fragmentation hurt them the most? Because I imagine they're sitting on tons of data, a lot of insights. What are these main pain points, or even do they miss out on?
I think what you find is, and this also goes back to my previous comment about my time at AstraZeneca, is in some situations they have a very good process in place today for maybe archiving the data, generating reports off certain kind of instruments. I think the challenges and the complexities start to arise when they want to bring a lot of that data together and start asking questions across different modalities, different kind of instruments, different vendors. And you see this a lot when reports, etc., need to be created. Thinking of CMC in particular, that pulls in a lot of diverse different data sets. There's some great examples out there today where customers are using things like AI to kind of help with that.
What things have you seen that companies do well in order to make progress on the connectivity?
There's a combination of things that customers do is they understand that they've got a problem and they obviously need a solution. One is to build something in-house to help with that, and then that soon gets snowball, shall we say, gets more complicated as things kind of start to scale. And then the alternative is to bring other vendors, third parties in to kind of help consolidate all that data and to provide guidance and the tools, etc., to consolidate all that data and to standardize it.
When people are on this journey of digital transformation, it can feel quite overwhelming because you have a lot of things you could work on. And on the other hand, oftentimes you have a tremendous time pressure. What are some of the things you have seen people skip over and then regret later?
You're right. I'd say it's the same. This is a large scale kind of project that is being undertaken. So same as every other thing of this scale. And I think what I've seen a lot of is, particularly with the in-house pieces, it's very easy to generate a proof of concept, to kind of quickly create something that fits the bill, that sweeps up all the data, transforms it, does whatever they need, and stores it so it's suitable for whatever their kind of needs are. I think that is pretty straightforward. But then as you start to scale that, then that becomes a challenge. And then you start to move into things like authentication, for example, is something that's kind of often overlooked, and things like data governance. So making sure that the right people have the right access to the digitally transformed data. So these are things that are often those kind of pilots, those POCs, perhaps sometimes kind of overlooked, but they do come back to bite at the end.
Let's make this very actionable for someone who has this very question, perhaps even in a smaller company where you don't have that many resources. Where should they start? What is the most important decision they should make?
I think the first choice that a customer embarking on a data transformation or digital transformation journey is really whether it's that build or buy. There's lots of great companies out there, including Thermo Fisher, that provide tools to enable this digital transformation. Obviously, there's a cost to that, and there's also a cost to kind of doing it internally. So then you're back into the crystal ball, thinking about how does this scale? What might the kind of future requirements be around this data? But I think that's probably the first choice. The key thing is to understand that they're not going to know everything to start off with. And that's fine, but they just got to realize that that will be the case. So not to kind of build something that necessarily puts them in a particular corner, that they will need that ability to scale and adapt.
So does that mean it's important to have a system that can also adapt to growing or changing needs?
Oh, absolutely. The one thing that we're finding with data and automation and the acceleration and the expectations of data post-COVID in particular is that things are moving so quickly at warp speed, as we put it. As soon as something is done, it's probably obsolete. So there'll be a new technology, there'll be new approach, and that's fine. And that's going to be inevitable, even as you're putting something together, that there'll be a new way of doing it. And that's just change management, and got to just be comfortable with living with that. Change is inevitable.
Absolutely, and we are in a fast-changing world. This concludes part 1 of our conversation with David Hardy. We've started pulling back the curtain on lab digitalization, the signs of fragmentation hiding in plain sight, and where data silos quietly drain productivity. There's much more to come in part 2. If you are finding value in these conversations, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts or your favorite platform. And thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you next time. All right, smart scientists. That's all for today on the Smart Biotech Scientist podcast. Thank you for tuning in and joining us on your journey to bioprocess mastery. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast platform. By doing so, we can empower more scientists like you. For additional bioprocessing tips, visit us at smartbiotechscientist.com. Stay tuned for more inspiring biotech insights in our next episode. Until then, let's continue to smarten up biotech.